In the spirit of Halloween, or in my case, Halloween Mania, we're getting back to Chowder with the Spookiest house in Marzipan. To tell you the truth, when I first saw bits and pieces of this episode before watching this episode from beginning to end, I felt mostly confused of how this episode is executed, considering that in this world's version of Christmas is Knishmas, and I also thought that there's going to be a Halloween holiday episode, but considering that we didn't got that, especially with the following episode, this focus is mainly like the Ed, and Eddie episode on the Ed, well, it's centering around the haunted house. The only difference is that Chowder needs to make a delivery in the house rather than exploring what's inside the house. However, he's a crybaby. But it doesn't surprise me considering that he's afraid of being in a relationship with Panini when it comes to a romantic relationship. This episode, while being a lot more different in comparison to the Ed, Eddie episode, it still made me amused and mostly satisfied for how this episode's execution just sums up a lot about the nature of Chowder. Granted, the Cartoon Crisis 3 video that I did back in May is questionable to say the least, considering that I had a lot of dislikes on that video. When it came to this episode, it didn't got me this upset, knowing full well that it was actually amusing to see Chowder go through these shenanigans, all because he's afraid to go inside the haunted house. Or in this case, just a regular house that he thinks is haunted. With this episode also featuring live action bits involving Gazpacho when it came to this episode and maybe the following episode, they either wanted this episode to be very memorable or the fact that they just didn't know how to bring the Halloween material into Chowder in the same ways as the Christmas episodes where they turned Christmas into Knishmas in this universe. But to be perfectly real with you, since that this episode isn't really that difficult to take itself seriously in comparison to the last Chowder episode that I did, and how entertaining this episode is from beginning to end, it made me appreciate of how they took the concept of the haunted house, even if it's nowhere near as close as the Ed and Eddie episode, to a different direction that really shows that this show doesn't really need a Halloween episode as much as other cartoon episodes. They have this running gag of the character sweating, but in reality, it's the water bottle that is cracked from the bottom that leaks out water, which makes them feel like that they're sweating, only for them to reveal the water bottle. The reasons onto why I didn't like this joke at first is because it's way too predictable, but at the same time, knowing full well that it's mainly the type of humor that actually works in this show, it's somewhat understandable to say the least. And with Gorgonzola and Panini being main characters in the final minutes of this episode, it really feels like that they're replicating what they did in the Christmas episode, but at the same time, that episode was 22 minutes long while this episode is 11 minutes long. So it really feels like that they wanted to put more focus on the following episodes, while the focus that they have in this episode was minimal to say the least. And since this only leads to them getting captured after setting up a plan that Chowder didn't hit the stranger in the house with a fish in time, which is supposed to be part of the joke, it really feels like that these characters would have done a lot more, even if it's only in the final minutes of this. Granted, it's mainly the conflict between Chowder and the person in the house, but to tell you the truth, they could have done a lot more better. Maybe it's just me thinking about the dynamic that these three had in the Christmas episode, but I actually felt like that this dynamic was somewhat entertaining, and the fact that it just had less screen time, it's somewhat disappointing. And as it turns out, the stranger in the house is Gazpacho or his mother, and Chowder thinks that it's Gazpacho as his mother, which is mainly in disguise, but at the same time, the episode doesn't explain that it's either Gazpacho in disguise or his mother. But to tell you the truth, it didn't ruin this episode, since that's the type of writing that Chowder is known for, which is somewhat ironic considering that in the Kanishmis episode, Gazpacho was in it, and it's been revealed that he was in disguise all along. So I'm going to bet that this is Gazpacho and not his mother. And the episode ends with they think that they're not getting chopped up, only to be revealed that only happens after coffee. And to tell you the truth, I found this ending somewhat humorous and predictable, and it made me appreciate what this episode is trying to do involving the nature of Chowder. I'm just saying this right now, if you think that I'm being a little too positive, I'm not really judgmental towards this show like in other Cartoon Network shows. Or other cartoon shows from other networks, but still. To be perfectly real with you, if you're interested into Halloween and Chowder, this, along with the following episode, is for you. And to be perfectly real with you, this episode was a good way to talk about, especially during Halloween Mania, since that there are a lot of open slots, and this is an episode that has an open slot, so it's really good to talk about this episode. And when it comes to the following episode, I might review it next year, considering that I'm not doing the schedule again next year, but I'm still gonna be doing Halloween related next year, depending on how I feel. So with that being said, I'm giving this episode a 7 out of 10.